The contract was a forgery. Lena knew it the moment the butler's hand trembled, just slightly, when he placed it before her. Blackthorn Estate didn't need a seamstress. It needed a ghost hunter, or an exorcist, or maybe just someone reckless enough to ask the questions that had gotten the last 3 housekeepers dismissed in under a month. She signed anyway, because buried in her grandmother's effects, she'd found a letter. 1 sentence. 8 words that pulled her 200 miles north into Gothic country. If anything happens, the girl must return. The girl. Her. This house had been waiting. If you want to see how deep this conspiracy goes, how Lena unravels a decades-old lie, and what truly haunts the halls of Blackthorn, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The rain hit the carriage window like thrown gravel. Lena pressed her palm against the glass, watching the landscape turn hostile. Trees bent sideways under the wind. The road, if you could call it that, had dissolved into ruts and mud deep enough to swallow a wheel. Twice already the driver had climbed down to push. He hadn't spoken to her since they left the station. She didn't blame him. Nobody wanted to drive to Blackthorn. The estate appeared through the rain like a ship-breaking fog. 3 stories of gray stone, windows too narrow, chimneys too many. No lights in any of them. The architecture was older than it had any right to be, the kind that made you think of things built to last through sieges, not seasons. The carriage lurched to a stop. Lena gathered her bag, small, practical, everything she owned condensed into 12 pounds of fabric and necessity, and stepped into the downpour. The driver didn't offer a hand. He was already turning the horses, eager to leave. "Wait," she started, but he cracked the reins and the carriage lurched forward, spraying mud across her skirt. She watched the taillights disappear into the storm, feeling the first real kick of panic. No going back now. The front door opened before she reached it. A man stood in the frame, tall, thin, 60s maybe, with the kind of rigid posture that came from a lifetime of disapproval. His suit was immaculate. His expression was not. "Miss Whitaker," he said. Not a question. "Yes, I'm late." He stepped aside just enough. "We expected you yesterday." "The train was delayed. Snow in the pass." She stepped inside and immediately understood why people left. The entrance hall was too clean. Floors polished to a mirror gloss, banisters gleaming, not a speck of dust on the chandelier overhead. It was the kind of clean that felt aggressive, weaponized, like the house was daring you to disturb it. And it was cold. Not winter cold, wrong cold, the kind that settled in your chest. "I'm Carson," the man said, closing the door with a finality that made her flinch. "Head of household. You'll take direction from me until the master says otherwise." "The master, Mr. Ashford. I'd like to meet him, discuss the terms of my contract." Carson's expression didn't shift, but something behind his eyes did. A flicker. Gone before she could name it. "Mr. Ashford doesn't involve himself in staffing decisions." "Then who hired me?" Silence. "Miss Whitaker," Carson said slowly, "you're here to restore textiles, linens, curtains, upholstery, the gentleman's wardrobe. Mrs. Hargrave, our previous seamstress, left suddenly. You'll take her rooms and her responsibilities. Do you have questions about the work itself?" She had about 40 questions, and none of them were about stitching. "Where's my contract?" she asked instead. "On your desk, 3rd floor east wing. Rose will show you." As if summoned, a girl appeared from a doorway Lena hadn't noticed. Couldn't have been more than 16. Freckles, red hair escaping a tight bun, eyes that looked too old for her face. "This way, miss," Rose said quietly. Lena followed her up a staircase that curved like a spine. The walls were lined with portraits, men in high collars, women in stiff dresses, all of them staring with the same expression, judgment. "How long have you worked here?" Lena asked. 3 years, miss." "Do you like it?" Rose's step faltered, just barely. "It's steady work." "That's not what I asked." The girl glanced back, and for a second Lena saw something close to fear. "We don't complain at Blackthorn," Rose whispered. They climbed 2 more flights in silence. The east wing was darker, narrower, the kind of space that had been added as an afterthought, carved out of attic and crawl space. Rose stopped at a door near the end of the hall. "Your room, miss." Washrooms shared 2 doors down. Suppers at 7 in the staff hall. Don't be late. Rose? But the girl was already retreating, her footsteps quick and light, like she couldn't leave fast enough. Lena pushed the door open. The room was small. Bed, desk, wardrobe, one window that looked out over the grounds. The textiles were already waiting, stacked in careful piles on every surface. Linens that needed hemming, curtains with frayed edges. A gentleman's coat draped across the chair like it was still being worn. She crossed to the desk. The contract sat in the center, edges perfectly aligned. She scanned it quickly. Standard terms: room, board, wages paid, quarterly. Signed at the bottom by Carson, dated 2 weeks prior. But the line for the employer's signature, Caleb Ashford's name, was blank. Her pulse kicked. She flipped the page. Nothing. Checked the envelope it came in. Empty. Someone had hired her. But it wasn't the man who owned this house. Lena sank into the chair, staring at the coat. It was beautiful work, wool, charcoal gray, tailored within an inch of its life. But the left sleeve was ruined, not torn, shredded, like something with claws had gone after it. She touched the fabric and found blood in the lining. Dinner was worse than the room. The staff hall was in the basement, low-ceilinged and damp, with a table long enough for 20 but set for 6. Carson sat at the head, silent and chewing with mechanical precision. Rose was there, eyes down. 2 others, a cook named Marjorie, heavy-set and suspicious, and a groundskeeper named Tom, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. And 1 empty chair. "Where's the 6th?" Lena asked. Marjorie's fork stopped midair. "We don't talk about Samuel," Carson said. "Why not?" "Because he's gone." "Gone where?" Carson set down his knife with the kind of control that suggested he wanted to throw it. "Miss Whitaker," he said, voice flat, "you've been here 3 hours. I suggest you spend less time asking questions and more time learning your place." Lena met his eyes. "My place is wherever the work is. If I'm expected to restore the master's wardrobe, I need to know how it got damaged. If I'm mending curtains, I need to understand the house. That's not curiosity. That's competence." Silence dropped like a stone. Marjorie looked at her plate. Tom shifted uncomfortably. Rose had gone pale. Carson smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Very well," he said. "The master's coat was damaged in an accident. The curtains are old. The house is sound. Does that satisfy your competence?" "What kind of accident?" "The kind we don't discuss." Lena held his gaze for another beat, then nodded slowly. She was being warned. Fine. She'd been warned before. After dinner, she didn't go back to her room. She went looking. The house at night was a different creature. Shadows pooled in corners that had been empty during the day. Floorboards creaked under no weight. Somewhere distant, a clock ticked out of sync with the others. She found the library on the 2nd floor, tucked behind a door marked private. It wasn't locked. Inside, the air smelled like leather and slow decay. Shelves floor to ceiling, thousands of books, most of them untouched for years. But one section, near the back, low shelf, had been disturbed. The dust pattern was wrong. Someone had been pulling volumes recently. Lena knelt, running her fingers along the spines. Estate records, family histories, legal documents going back a century. She pulled the nearest ledger. The handwriting inside was meticulous. Expenses, wages, purchases, everything documented down to the penny. She flipped forward, scanning entries. 1900. Then a gap. 18 months of missing records. Just gone. The pages had been cut out cleanly, professionally, not torn, removed. She checked the next ledger. Same thing. Another gap. Different year. Someone had been editing the estate's history. "Find something interesting?" Lena spun. A man stood in the doorway. 30s, maybe. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes like deep water, unreadable and cold. He wore the kind of clothes that cost more than she'd make in a year, but they hung on him like he'd forgotten he was wearing them. Caleb Ashford. Had to be. "I was just trespassing," he finished. His voice was quiet, controlled, the kind that didn't need volume to cut. That door was marked. It wasn't locked. An oversight. He stepped into the room, and the space seemed to contract around him. Not physically. Something else. Presence. Weight. The kind of gravity that came from years of people getting out of your way. Lena stood slowly, keeping the ledger behind her. I'm Lena Whitaker, your new seamstress. I didn't hire a seamstress. Then who did? His expression flickered, just for a second. Confusion, maybe, or recognition. Carson handles staffing. Carson said you approved it. Carson was mistaken. He moved closer, eyes dropping to the ledger still in her hand. What are you doing with estate records? She could lie. Probably should. But something about the way he was looking at her, not angry, not suspicious, just tired, made her choose truth. Looking for gaps, she said. Someone's been removing pages. 18 months here, another year there. I wanted to know why. And what conclusion did you reach? That someone's hiding something. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was a bitter sound, humorless and sharp. Everyone in this house is hiding something, Miss Whitaker. You'll fit right in. He reached past her and took the ledger, fingers brushing hers. His hands were scarred. Old burns, maybe, or something worse. Go to bed, he said. In the morning, you'll pack your things and leave. I'll pay you for the week. I signed a contract. A contract I didn't authorize. It's void. I came 200 miles for this job. Then you wasted a trip. Lena felt heat rising in her chest. Not anger, something sharper. She'd spent the last of her savings getting here, had left behind a boarding house in a city that was running out of work. This job was supposed to be temporary, a foothold, a chance to rebuild after her grandmother died and left her with nothing but debts and a locked box of letters she still didn't understand. One of those letters had mentioned Blackthorn. My grandmother worked here, she said quietly. 30 years ago. Her name was Elizabeth Carr. Do you remember her? Caleb froze. What did you say? Elizabeth Carr. She was a housekeeper. She left suddenly, same as your last seamstress. Same as Samuel, I'm guessing. Before she died, she left me a letter. It said if anything happened, I should come here. That's impossible. I have the letter. Then it's a forgery. Why would someone forge? Enough! His voice cracked like a whip. I don't know who sent you or what you think you'll find here, but you're wrong. Your grandmother never worked at Blackthorn. No one by that name ever did. So take your letter, take your theories, and get out of my house. He turned and walked out, taking the ledger with him. Lena stood there, heart pounding, staring at the empty doorway. She'd rattled him, badly, which meant she was right. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat at the desk in her room, the torn coat spread before her, and studied it under lamplight. The damage wasn't random. 4 parallel cuts, evenly spaced. Claws? Yes, but controlled. Deliberate. Like something had grabbed him and held on. There was more blood than she'd first thought, not just in the lining, soaked into the wool near the shoulder, days old, maybe weeks, cleaned, but not well enough. She threaded a needle and started working, not to repair it, not yet, to understand it. She followed the seams, the structure, the way the fabric had been stressed and torn. The coat had been expensive once, custom made, but it had been worn hard, mended poorly, worn again. There were older repairs beneath the new damage, stitches that didn't match, patches that didn't fit. Someone had been trying to hold this coat together for years. Why not just replace it? She turned it inside out and found the tailor's mark, a small embroidered label near the collar. A. Hartwell and Sons, London, 1892. 34 years old. She set the coat aside and pulled the stack of linens closer. Tablecloths, bed sheets, curtains, all of them marked with the same careful inventory tags. She sorted them by age. The oldest pieces were museum quality, hand-stitched, embroidered, the kind of work that took months. The newer ones were machine-made, cheaper, functional. The estate was running out of money, or someone was making sure it looked that way. She worked until the lamp guttered and the sky outside began to gray. Then she hid the coat under her bed, changed into a fresh dress, and went downstairs. The house was silent, too silent. No footsteps, no kitchen sounds, no sign of Rose or Marjorie preparing breakfast. Lena found the staff hall empty, the kitchen empty, the parlor, the drawing room, the dining hall, all empty. She climbed to the second floor, her heart starting to race. Still nothing. Third floor. Her floor. Every door was closed. She pressed her ear to Rose's room and heard breathing, soft, rhythmic, asleep. They were all still here, just silent, like the house had swallowed sound. She turned toward the main staircase and stopped. Caleb stood at the end of the hall. He was dressed the same as last night, which meant he hadn't slept either. His eyes were shadowed, hollow. He looked like a man who'd been awake for days. "You're still here," he said. "I don't leave until I'm paid. Carson will handle it. I want to talk to you. We have nothing to discuss." Lena took a breath. "Your coat is 34 years old, custom made in London, probably a gift or an inheritance. It's been mended at least 6 times, badly, by someone who didn't know what they were doing. The blood in the lining is yours. The damage happened recently, and you've been wearing it anyway because you can't let it go." He stared at her. "You're not just a seamstress," he said quietly. "No, I'm not." "Then what are you?" "Someone who fixes things people are too afraid to throw away." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Caleb turned and walked toward his study. "Follow me," he said. The study was smaller than she expected. 1 desk, 2 chairs, walls lined with books that actually looked red. No paintings, no ornaments, just work. Caleb sat behind the desk and gestured to the chair across from him. Lena sat. He opened a drawer, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and slid it across the desk. She unfolded it. It was a letter. Handwritten, ink faded, but still legible. "Caleb, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen. The house is sick. Not broken. Sick. It's in the walls, the books, the people who stay too long. Your father knew. He tried to fix it, and it killed him. Don't trust Carson. Don't trust the records. Don't trust anyone who tells you the estate is fine. There's a girl coming, Elizabeth's granddaughter. She'll know what to do. Let her in. M." Lena looked up. "Who's M?" "My mother," Caleb said. His voice was hollow. "She disappeared 3 years ago. This letter arrived 2 weeks later. No postmark, no return address. Just this. And you think I'm the girl she meant. I think you're the only person reckless enough to come here after reading a letter like that." Lena's hands were shaking. She set the letter down carefully. "What happened to your father?" "He drowned. In the estate lake, 20 years ago." "Accident?" "That's what they said. But you don't believe it." Caleb leaned back, studying her with those cold, unreadable eyes. "My father was a strong swimmer," he said. "The lake is shallow, and he was found with stones in his pockets." Lena felt the air leave her lungs. "And your mother?" "Vanished from a locked room. No signs of struggle, no note. Just gone." "But she left you this." "Yes." "Which means she planned it. Or someone wanted me to think she did." Lena sat back, mind racing. The missing ledger pages, the forged contract, the letter from her grandmother, the servants who wouldn't talk. "You think someone in this house killed your father and took your mother?" "I think," Caleb said slowly, "that this estate has been rotting from the inside for 30 years. And everyone who tried to stop it either left or died." "Then why are you still here?" His jaw tightened. "Because it's mine. And I don't run." Lena looked at him. Really looked. At the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the desk like he was holding on to the last solid thing in his life. He wasn't cold. He was terrified. And he was alone. "Show me the lake," she said. They walked the grounds in silence. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still bruised and low. The estate looked worse in daylight, lawns overgrown, hedges untrimmed, the garden choked with weeds. The lake sat at the far edge of the property, dark and still as a wound. "He was found there," Caleb said, pointing to a section near the dock. "Face down, coat weighed down with stones from the garden." "Who found him?" "Carson. And he ruled it suicide." "The constable did. Carson just agreed." Lena walked to the edge, staring into the water. It was murky, cold, the kind of deep that swallowed light. "Did your father have enemies?" "Everyone with money has enemies." "Did he have debts?" Caleb hesitated. "I don't know. The records from that year are missing." "Of course they were." Lena turned back toward the house. From here she could see the third floor. Her window, roses, the others. And one room with curtains drawn tight. "Whose room is that?" she asked. Caleb followed her gaze. His expression shifted. "My mother's. It's locked." "Do you have the key?" "No." "Then we'll pick it." "Absolutely not." Lena started walking. "Miss Whitaker, if your mother left you that letter, she left you more. And whatever it is, it's in that room. You can't just watch me." She didn't wait for permission. She crossed the grounds, climbed the steps, and went straight for the third floor. Caleb caught up to her at the door. "This is a mistake," he said. "Then it's mine to make." She pulled a hairpin from her bun and knelt by the lock. "You know how to pick locks." "I know how to do a lot of things." The lock was old, simple. 3 pins, no security measures. She had it open in under a minute. The door swung inward. The room was untouched. Bed made, clothes in the wardrobe, books stacked neatly on the nightstand. But there was dust, thick, undisturbed. No one had been inside since she left. Lena stepped in carefully. "What are we looking for?" Caleb asked. "Anything that doesn't belong." She started with the desk. Letters, receipts, correspondence, all mundane. Then the wardrobe. Dresses, shoes, nothing hidden. The bed was next. She knelt, checking under the frame, and found a box. Small, wooden, locked with a brass clasp. She pulled it out and set it on the bed. Caleb stared. "I've never seen that before." Lena tried the clasp. Locked. She reached for another hairpin. "Wait!" Caleb pulled a small key from his pocket. "My mother gave me this when I was a boy. Said it would open something important someday." He fitted it to the lock. It turned. Inside the box were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to Caleb's mother. All from the same sender. Elizabeth Carr, Lena's grandmother. Her hands trembled as she lifted the first one. "Margaret, I found the second ledger. You were right. He's been stealing for years, small amounts, carefully hidden. But it adds up. Thousands, maybe more. I'm making copies. When you're ready, we'll go to the constable together. E." She opened another. "Margaret, he knows. I don't know how, but he does. Carson came to my room tonight, told me to stop asking questions, said accidents happen. I'm scared. E." And another. "Margaret, I'm leaving tonight. I can't stay. I can't risk it. But I'm not running. I'm hiding the evidence somewhere safe. When the time is right, someone will come for it. Someone we can trust. Tell Caleb I'm sorry. E." Lena looked up, throat tight. "They were working together," she whispered. "My grandmother and your mother. They found proof that Carson was embezzling, and he silenced them." Caleb's face had gone white. "My mother didn't leave," he said. "She was taken. And my grandmother ran before he could do the same to her." They stared at each other. "Where did she hide the evidence?" Caleb asked. Lena's mind raced. The letter her grandmother left her, the one that brought her here. "If anything happens, the girl must return." "Return, not come. Return." "She hid it here," Lena said. "In the house. Somewhere I'd find it." "How would you know where to look?" "Because she raised me." Lena stood, heart pounding. "She taught me everything. How to sew, how to read fabric, how to see what's broken underneath." She turned and ran. Caleb followed, shouting questions she didn't answer. She went straight to her room, grabbed the coat from under her bed, and spread it on the desk. "What are you Shut up. Let me think." She turned the coat inside out again, studying every seam, every stitch. And then she saw it. A patch near the hem, older than the others. Different thread, different technique. Her grandmother's work. She grabbed her sewing scissors and carefully cut the stitches. Inside the patch was a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it with shaking hands. It was a ledger page, a copy. Handwritten entries documenting years of theft, wages skimmed, estate funds redirected, property sold under false pretenses, all signed by Carson and countersigned by someone else. A name that made Caleb go rigid. Victor Ashford, his uncle. "No," Caleb breathed. "That's not possible." "Who is he?" "My father's brother. He lives in London. He's been managing the estate's finances since my father died." Lena's stomach dropped. "Caleb, if Carson and your uncle were working together, Then my father's death wasn't suicide. And your mother's disappearance wasn't random. They stared at the paper, the truth settling like ice. We need to go to the police, Lena said. With what? A 30-year-old ledger page and a box of letters? They'll say it's not enough. Then we get more. How? Lena looked at him, adrenaline singing in her veins. We make them confess. Caleb paced the length of a room like a caged animal, the ledger page clutched in his fist. We can't just accuse them, he said for the third time. Carson's been here for 40 years. My uncle controls the estate's accounts. They'll destroy us. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, needle and thread in hand, already working on the coat. Her fingers moved fast, precise, thinking and stitching at the same time. Then we don't accuse them, she said. We make them think they've already won. What does that mean? It means you play the grieving lord who's given up, and I play the seamstress who doesn't know anything. She knotted off a stitch and bit the thread clean. We need more evidence. Real numbers, current theft, not 30-year-old records. They'll claim those are forgeries. How do we get current records? Carson keeps the books locked in his office. Then we get into his office. Caleb stopped pacing. You want to break in? I want to look. There's a difference. Not legally. Good thing I'm not a lawyer. She held up the coat, examining her work. The sleeve was coming together, not perfect, but strong, functional. How well do you know your uncle? Victor? Caleb's jaw tightened. Not well. He visited once after my father died. Stayed 3 days. I was 16. He told me I'd inherit a legacy and then disappeared back to London. Does he visit often? Never. Everything's handled by correspondence. Who handles the correspondence? Caleb went still. Carson. Lena set the coat aside and stood. Then your uncle might not even know what Carson's doing. Or he does, and they're splitting the take. Either way, we need to see those letters. They'll be in Carson's office. Then tonight, we go to Carson's office. And if we're caught, she met his eyes. Then we'd better not get caught. Mad. The rest of the day dragged like a funeral march. Lena spent it in the sewing room, a cramped space on the second floor that smelled like mothballs and old wood. She worked on the linens, hemming tablecloths and mending curtains, all while Carson made his rounds. He checked on her twice. The first time, he stood in the doorway and watched in silence for a full minute before leaving. The second time, he came inside. You're still here, he said. Lena didn't look up from her stitching. Mr. Ashford asked me to finish the week. Did he? He said the coat needed proper repair, something about sentimental value. Carson moved closer, eyes on the coat draped across her lap. She'd brought it down from her room deliberately. Bait. That coat is very old, he said quietly. 1892, custom work, beautiful construction. She ran her thumb along a seam. Whoever tried to mend it before didn't know what they were doing. Used the wrong thread weight, wrong stitch pattern. It's like they were trying to erase the original work. Perhaps they were just unskilled. Or scared. She finally looked up. Scared people make mistakes. For a moment, something flickered behind Carson's eyes. Not anger, calculation. Miss Whitaker, he said slowly. Has anyone told you about the last seamstress? Only that she left suddenly? She asked too many questions. Went places she wasn't meant to go. He smiled, thin and cold. She fell down the main staircase, 32 steps, broke her neck on the landing. Lena's pulse kicked, but she kept her face neutral. That's terrible. It was an accident, of course. The stairs can be treacherous in the dark. I'll be careful. See that you are. He turned and left, footsteps echoing down the hall. Lena's hands were shaking. She set down the needle before she stabbed herself. Rose appeared in the doorway minutes later, pale and wide-eyed. You shouldn't talk to him like that, she whispered. Like what? Like you're not afraid. Should I be? Rose glanced over her shoulder, then stepped inside and closed the door. Mrs. Hargrave wasn't the first, she said, voice barely audible. There was a maid before her, and a footman before that. And before him? She stopped, swallowing hard. People who ask questions don't last at Blackthorn. Then why are you still here? Because I keep my head down and my mouth shut. Tears welled in her eyes. But you're different. You're not scared of him. and that's going to get you killed. Lena stood and took the girl's hands. They were ice cold. Rose, listen to me. I'm not leaving, not until I know the truth. But I need your help. I can't. Does Carson keep his office locked at night? Rose's breath hitched. You can't go in there. Does he lock it? Yes, always. Where does he keep the key? On his belt. He never takes it off. Rose was trembling now. Miss, please, don't do this. Just leave tonight. I'll help you pack. You can take the morning train and... My grandmother worked here 30 years ago, Lena said quietly. Her name was Elizabeth Carr. Do you know that name? Rose froze. She left because someone threatened her. Someone in this house. And I think that same person killed Mr. Ashford's father and made his mother disappear. Lena squeezed the girl's hands. I'm not leaving until I prove it. Rose stared at her, tears spilling over. There's a second key, she whispered. In the kitchen, hidden in the flour tin. Marjorie doesn't know it's there. Carson thinks no one does. But I saw him use it once when he lost his belt key. Can you get it? If I'm caught, you won't be. I'll create a distraction. Rose pulled her hands free, shaking her head. You're going to get us all killed. Or I'm going to save you. The girl looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once and slipped out of the room. Lena exhaled slowly and picked up the coat again. Her fingers found the torn sleeve, the place where claws, or something worse, had ripped through. She threaded the needle and got back to work. Boss, midnight came slow and cold. Lena waited in her room, fully dressed, curtains drawn. She'd spent the evening at dinner playing the role Carson expected, quiet, focused on her work, asking no questions. Marjorie had served stew that tasted like wet cardboard. Tom had excused himself early. Rose hadn't looked at her once, but when Lena returned to her room, she found a small key tucked under her pillow. Now she stood at her door, listening. The house had gone silent an hour ago. No footsteps, no creaking floorboards, no sign of Carson making his rounds. She cracked the door open. The hallway was dark, lit only by moonlight through the far window. She moved carefully, keeping to the edges where the floorboards didn't groan. The main staircase was too exposed. She took the servants' stairs instead, narrow, steep, the kind that disappeared into walls. The second floor was worse. Too many doors, too many places for Carson to appear. But she made it to the east wing, where his office sat behind a door marked private. She tried the key. It turned. The office was smaller than she expected. One desk, filing cabinets lining the walls, a single lamp on the corner table. Everything meticulously organized. No dust, no clutter. The desk itself was empty except for a blotter and an inkwell. Too empty. Lena moved to the filing cabinets and tried the first drawer. Locked. Second drawer. Locked. All of them locked. She checked the desk. 3 drawers, all locked. Damn it. She pulled out another hairpin and got to work on the desk. The lock was newer, tighter. It took 3 minutes and 2 broken pins before it clicked open. Inside were ledgers. Current ones. She pulled the top book and flipped it open. Estate expenses. Wages. Repairs. Purchases. All documented in Carson's tight, controlled handwriting. She scanned the entries looking for anything unusual, and found it immediately. The numbers didn't match. Small discrepancies, 5 pounds here, 10 there. Amounts that could be dismissed as rounding errors or clerical mistakes, but they were consistent. Every month, every entry. She did the math in her head. Over a year, it added up to nearly 300 pounds. Over 30 years, her breath caught. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. She flipped to the correspondence section and found letters between Carson and Victor Ashford. Polite, formal, updates on the estate, requests for funds, approvals for expenses. But the amounts in the letters didn't match the amounts in the ledger. Carson was reporting higher expenses to Victor and pocketing the difference. She was about to close the book when she saw a name that made her freeze. Margaret Ashford, Caleb's mother. The entry was dated 3 years ago. A payment, 500 pounds, marked as severance. Severance for what? Lena turned the page and found another entry. Elizabeth Carr. Severance. 200 pounds. Her grandmother, dated 30 years ago. She stared at the numbers, pulse roaring in her ears. They hadn't run. They'd been paid off. or made to look like they had. Footsteps. Lena's head snapped up. Someone was coming down the hall. Heavy, measured steps. Carson's gait. She shoved the ledger back into the drawer, locked it, and bolted for the door. Too late. The handle turned. Lena dove behind the desk just as the door opened. Carson stepped inside carrying a lamp. The light spilled across the room, throwing long shadows against the walls. Lena pressed herself flat against the floor, barely breathing. Carson moved to the filing cabinets. She heard keys jingling, a drawer sliding open, papers rustling. He was looking for something. She risked a glance around the edge of the desk. His back was to her. He had a file open, scanning through documents. If she moved, he'd hear her. If she stayed, he'd find her. She looked at the door. 10 feet. Might as well be a mile. Carson muttered something under his breath and closed the drawer. Lena's muscles coiled. He turned toward the desk. She didn't think. She just moved. She rolled out from behind the desk and sprinted for the door. Hey! Carson lunged, but she was faster. She hit the hallway at a dead run, his shouts echoing behind her. She didn't head for the stairs. Too obvious. Instead, she turned left, deeper into the east wing, toward the storage rooms and unused chambers. Footsteps pounded behind her. She grabbed a doorknob. Locked. Another. Locked. Third door. Open. She threw herself inside and slammed it shut just as Carson rounded the corner. The room was pitch black. She felt her way along the wall, hands shaking, looking for somewhere to hide. Her fingers found fabric. Heavy, thick, curtains. She ducked behind them just as the door crashed open. Carson's lamplight swept the room. Lena held her breath, pressed against the cold window glass. "I know you're in here," Carson said. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Come out. We'll discuss this like adults." Silence. "You think you're clever, breaking into my office, reading my files." He moved closer. Lena could see his shadow stretching across the floor. "But you don't understand what you've stumbled into. This house has rules, and people who break them don't leave." The curtain shifted. Lena's heart stopped. Carson grabbed the fabric and yanked it aside. Empty. Lena was already gone, slipping out from behind a second set of curtains on the opposite wall. She'd moved while he was talking, silent as smoke. She was through the door before he could turn around. This time, she ran for the main stairs. Voices below. More footsteps. Tom and Marjorie, roused by the shouting. Lena pivoted and took the servants' stairs instead, climbing fast, legs burning. Third floor. Her floor. She burst into her room and locked the door. Seconds later, fists pounded on the wood. "Open this door, Miss Whitaker." She didn't answer. She was already at the window looking down. 3 stories, no ledge, no trellis, just stone and a very long drop. The pounding intensified. "I will have this door broken down." Lena turned, mind racing. She couldn't fight Carson, couldn't run, couldn't hide, but she could make noise. She grabbed the coat, the one piece of evidence she had, and shoved it into her bag. Then she opened the window and screamed, not words, just sound, loud, raw, desperate. The pounding stopped. She screamed again. Somewhere in the house, another door opened, then another. Voices. Confused, alarmed. Lena kept screaming until she heard the one voice she needed. "What the hell is going on?" "Caleb." She stopped, gasping for air. Footsteps approached her door. Different ones. Faster. "Miss Whitaker?" Caleb's voice tight with worry. "Open the door." "I can't," she called back. "Carson's trying to break in." Silence. Then Caleb's voice, colder than she'd ever heard it. "Carson, step away from the door." "Sir, this woman broke into my office. I said step away." A pause. Then footsteps retreating. Lena unlocked the door and opened it. Caleb stood in the hallway, still in his nightclothes, hair disheveled, eyes blazing. Behind him, Carson stood rigid, jaw clenched. Rose and Marjorie hovered near the stairs, watching. "What happened?" Caleb asked. Lena met his eyes. They'd agreed on a plan. Time to stick to it. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I went down to the kitchen for water. I got lost on my way back. Mr. Carson found me in the East Wing and accused me of trespassing." "She was in my office," Carson snapped. "Was she?" Caleb turned to him. "Did you see her inside?" "I heard someone—" "Did you see her?" Carson's mouth thinned. No, but then you woke the entire household over a woman getting lost in her own place of employment. Caleb's voice was ice. Miss Whitaker has been here 3 days. The house is large. Mistakes happen. Sir, I must insist. You may insist in the morning. Right now, everyone goes back to bed. That includes you, Carson. For a moment, Lena thought Carson might refuse, but he bowed his head. As you wish, sir. He turned and left, footsteps echoing down the stairs. Marjorie and Rose scattered. Caleb waited until they were alone, then stepped into Lena's room and closed the door. Did you get it? He asked quietly. She pulled the bag from under her bed and showed him the coat. Not what I meant. I found the ledgers. Carson's been skimming funds for years, reporting false expenses to your uncle and pocketing the difference. There are also payments listed as severance for my grandmother and your mother. Caleb's expression darkened. Severance. Dated to when they disappeared, which means either they were paid to leave or someone wanted it to look that way. He ran a hand through his hair. Damn it, we need those ledgers. We can't get them. Not now. Carson will be watching. Then what do we do? Lena sat on the edge of the bed, thinking. We go to the source, she said finally. Your uncle. If he's innocent, he'll help us. If he's guilty, we force his hand. How? We send him a letter. Tell him we found evidence of embezzlement. Invite him to Blackthorn to review the books personally. Caleb stared at her. That's insane. If he's working with Carson, then they'll panic, and panicked people make mistakes. Or they'll kill us. Not if we're ready for them. Caleb sank into the chair, looking exhausted, older than his years. You really think this will work? He asked. I think it's the only move we have left. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Write the letter, he said. I'll sign it. The letter went out the next morning. Caleb hand-delivered it to the post himself, bypassing Carson entirely. It was brief, formal, and carefully worded. Uncle Victor, I've discovered inconsistencies in the estate's financial records that require immediate attention. I request your presence at Blackthorn within the week to conduct a full audit. This matter is urgent. Caleb. 3 days later, a telegram arrived. Arriving Friday. Expect me by evening. V.A. Carson read the telegram at breakfast, his face unreadable. Your uncle is coming, he asked Caleb. Yes. May I ask why? Estate business. I handle estate business. Caleb set down his fork and met Carson's eyes. Not anymore. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Carson folded the telegram carefully and placed it beside his plate. Very well, sir, he said. I'll prepare the guest rooms. He left without another word. Lena watched him go, pulse thrumming. He knows, she said quietly. Let him know, Caleb replied. We're done hiding. Friday came cold and gray. Lena spent the day finishing the coat. It was perfect now, every seam reinforced, every tier mended, the fabric restored to something close to its original glory. She'd even matched the original stitching pattern, a detail that took hours but felt necessary. It wasn't just a coat anymore. It was evidence, proof that things broken could be made whole. She packed it carefully and brought it down to Caleb's study. He was standing at the window, staring out at the drive. Any sign of him? She asked. Not yet. She set the coat on his desk. This is finished. Caleb turned and looked at it. Really looked. You fixed it, he said quietly. I told you I would. He picked it up, running his fingers over the sleeve where the damage had been. The repair was invisible unless you knew where to look. My father gave me this coat, he said, the day I turned 18. He said it was a reminder that some things are worth holding on to, even when they fall apart. Smart man. He was. Caleb's voice cracked. And Carson killed him for it. Before Lena could respond, the sound of carriage wheels crunched on gravel outside. They both went to the window. A black carriage pulled up to the front steps. The door opened and a man stepped out. Victor Ashford was younger than Lena expected. Mid-40s, well-dressed, clean-shaven. He looked nothing like Caleb. Lighter hair, sharper features, the kind of face that smiled easily. He was smiling now as Carson greeted him at the door. That's him? Lena asked. That's him. They watched as Victor and Carson disappeared inside. What now? Lena asked. Caleb put on the coat. It fit perfectly. Now, he said, we finish this. What? Dinner was a performance. Victor sat at the head of the table, charming and relaxed, telling stories about London society and business ventures. Caleb played the attentive nephew. Carson served the meal with his usual precision, and Lena sat at the far end, silent, watching. She'd been introduced as the new seamstress. Victor had barely glanced at her. So, Victor said, cutting into his roast, you mentioned inconsistencies in the books. What sort of inconsistencies? Expenses that don't match the records, Caleb said. Payments listed that were never made. Income that disappeared. Victor frowned. That's troubling. Carson, have you noticed anything unusual? Nothing, sir, Carson said smoothly. The books are in perfect order. Then perhaps it's a misunderstanding, Victor said, turning back to Caleb. You're young. Estate finances can be complex, easy to misread entries. I didn't misread them. Nevertheless, I'd be happy to review everything tomorrow. Put your mind at ease. Caleb set down his fork. I'd prefer to review them tonight. The temperature in the room dropped. Victor's smile didn't falter. Tonight? That's rather urgent. This is rather important. Of course. Carson, fetch the ledgers. Right away, sir. Carson left the room. Victor sipped his wine, eyes on Caleb. You seem tense, nephew. I'm concerned about the estate. As you should be. It's your inheritance. He leaned back in his chair. Tell me, have you given any thought to selling? With your mother gone and no other family, managing a property this size alone must be overwhelming. I'm not selling. Pity. I have clients in London who'd pay handsomely for a property like this. You could live quite comfortably on the proceeds, travel, invest, start fresh. Lena's pulse quickened. He was testing Caleb, seeing how desperate he was. I'm not interested, Caleb said. Not even for, say, £50,000. The number hung in the air. No. Victor's smile thinned. You're very much like your father. Stubborn. I'll take that as a compliment. Carson returned with the ledgers and set them on the table. Caleb opened the first one and started flipping through pages. Victor watched, still smiling. See, he said after a moment, everything's in order. Not quite. Caleb stopped on a page and turned it toward Victor. This entry. March of last year. Payment to a contractor for roof repairs, £500. Yes? The roof wasn't repaired last March. I would have noticed. Victor glanced at Carson. Is this true? There was a small leak, sir, Carson said. We had it patched. For £500? Caleb's voice was steel. That's enough to replace the entire roof. The contractor charged. There was no contractor. Caleb pulled out another ledger. Because the same company is listed here, and here, and here, different months, different amounts, same name. Except this company doesn't exist, I checked. Victor's smile finally faded. That's a serious accusation, he said quietly. It's a fact. Then there must be an explanation. Victor turned to Carson. Well? Carson's expression didn't change. Perhaps an error in record keeping. An error that's been repeated monthly for 3 years? Caleb, Victor said, voice hardening. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting someone has been stealing from this estate, and I want to know who. The silence stretched. Then Victor laughed. It was a cold sound, empty of humor. You brought me all the way from London for this? A filing mistake? It's not a mistake. Then prove it. Victor stood. Show me evidence. Real evidence, not speculation. Caleb met Lena's eyes across the table. She nodded. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the folded ledger page, the one Lena's grandmother had hidden 30 years ago. He placed it on the table. This, Caleb said, is a record of theft dating back 3 decades. It documents systematic embezzlement, falsified expenses, and payments made to silence anyone who discovered the truth. It's signed by Carson, and countersigned by you. Victor stared at the paper. His face went white, then red. Where did you get that? He whispered. Does it matter? That document is a forgery. Is it? Caleb unfolded it carefully. Because the handwriting matches the current ledgers, the signature matches yours, and the dates align perfectly with my father's death. Victor's hands clenched into fists. You don't know what you're talking about. I know my father didn't drown himself. I know my mother didn't abandon me. And I know you and Carson have been bleeding this estate dry for 30 years. You have no proof. I have this, and I have witnesses. What witnesses? Lena stood. Me, she said. Victor finally looked at her. Really looked. Who the hell are you? Elizabeth Carr's granddaughter. The woman you paid off, or tried to. The woman who found the evidence you thought was buried. Victor's face twisted. You're lying. Am I? Lena pulled a second paper from her pocket, one of the letters her grandmother had written to Margaret. Because I have letters, dozens of them, detailing everything you did, and tomorrow morning I'm taking them to the constable. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Victor lunged, not at Caleb, at the ledger page. Caleb was faster. He grabbed it and stepped back. Carson, Victor snapped. Take that paper, now. Carson didn't move. I said take it. Carson looked at Victor, then at Caleb, then at the door. And he ran. Caleb moved to follow, but Lena grabbed his arm. Let them go, she said. Are you insane? They're running. Exactly. And panicked men make mistakes. She pulled him toward the door. We need to get to the constable. Now. They ran through the entrance hall, Lena still clutching the letters, Caleb with the ledger page folded inside his coat. The front door stood open, rain hammering the steps outside. No sign of Carson or Victor. The stable, Caleb said. They'll try to take the carriage. They sprinted across the grounds, rain soaking through their clothes in seconds. The stable doors were open, lamplight spilling out. Inside, they could hear shouting. Not leaving without those documents. Then you're a fool. The boy knows everything. Caleb and Lena pressed against the wall outside, listening. How much does he actually have? Victor's voice, tight with panic. Enough to hang us both, Carson replied. That page alone is damning. And if the girl has letters, then we silence her. Lena's blood went cold. We can't, Carson said. Not now. Too many witnesses. The staff has seen her. If she disappears the same night you arrive, I don't care about optics, Carson. I care about not spending the rest of my life in prison. Then we leave. Tonight. Take what we can and disappear. And go where? They'll hunt us down. Not if we're smart. I have contacts. We can get to the continent. Start over. Caleb stepped into the doorway. Or, he said quietly, you can stay and face what you've done. Both men spun around. Carson's hand went to his belt. Lena saw the glint of metal. A knife, small but sharp. Don't, she said. Carson ignored her. He moved fast for a man his age, closing the distance to Caleb in 3 strides. But Caleb was ready. He sidestepped, grabbed Carson's wrist, and twisted. The knife clattered to the ground. Victor grabbed a pitchfork from the wall. Stay back, he warned, leveling it at Caleb. Lena moved without thinking. She grabbed a saddle blanket and threw it at Victor. It hit him in the face, and he stumbled backward, the pitchfork swinging wide. Caleb kicked it out of his hands. Enough, Caleb said, breathing hard. It's over. Carson laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. Over? Boy, this was over the day your father figured out what we were doing. Do you know what he said when I confronted him? He said he'd forgive me. Forgive me. Carson spat the word like poison. 40 years of service, and he was going to throw me out like garbage over a few thousand pounds. So you killed him. I gave him a choice. Leave quietly, take a settlement, let me run things properly. But he refused. Said he'd go to the authorities. So I made it look like he'd given up. Filled his pockets with stones, held him under until he stopped fighting. The words fell like hammer blows. Caleb's face had gone white. And my mother? She started asking questions 3 years ago. Found some of Elizabeth's old letters hidden in the library. I couldn't risk her finding more. Carson's expression was almost sad. She was smarter than your father, knew I wouldn't let her leave alive, so she ran before I could stop her. Where is she? I don't know, and that's the truth. She vanished one night, left that letter for you and disappeared. I've been looking for her ever since. Victor had recovered the pitchfork. He held it low, eyes darting between Caleb and the door. This changes nothing, he said. Without the original ledgers, you can't prove anything. That page is decades old. Any lawyer will tear it apart. Then I'll get the originals, Caleb said. They're locked in my office, and you'll never get past. A voice cut through the rain. Actually, we already have them. Everyone turned. Rose stood in the stable doorway, soaked to the bone, holding a leather satchel. Behind her was Tom, and Marjorie, and 3 other staff members Lena had never seen. Rose held up the satchel. I went to Mr. Carson's office after dinner, found these hidden in a locked drawer, every ledger, every falsified record, everything. Carson's face went gray. You little... Don't. Tom stepped forward, holding a shovel. He was bigger than Carson, younger, and clearly done being afraid. You've terrorized this staff for years, threatened us, hurt us, made us too scared to speak up. Well, we're done being scared. Marjorie nodded. We all heard what you just said about Mr. Ashford, about the mistress. Every word. Carson looked around at the faces surrounding him, servants he'd controlled for decades, now standing united against him. You're all fools, he said quietly. Do you know what happens to staff who betray their employers? You'll never work again. I'll make sure of it. I don't think you'll be in a position to make sure of anything, Caleb said. He took the satchel from Rose. Thank you. All of you. Rose's eyes were wet. Mrs. Margaret was kind to me. She didn't deserve what happened to her. Victor made his move then. He dropped the pitchfork and ran for the door. Tom swung the shovel. It connected with Victor's shoulder, sending him sprawling into the mud. Anyone have rope? Tom asked mildly. They tied both men to posts in the stable and sent Tom to fetch the constable. It took an hour for the authorities to arrive. A constable named Davies and 2 officers, all of them soaked and irritated at being dragged out in a storm. Until they saw the evidence. Davies sat in Blackthorn's library, going through the ledgers page by page while Carson and Victor were held in the drawing room under guard. Caleb paced near the fireplace. Lena sat in a chair, exhausted, still clutching her grandmother's letters. This is extensive, Davies said finally. He was a broad man with gray whiskers and sharp eyes that missed nothing. 30 years of systematic theft, falsified records, and if what your staff says is true, we're also looking at murder. Can you prove it? Caleb asked. With this? Absolutely. The financial crimes are ironclad. The murder... He shook his head. That's trickier. It's been 20 years. No body was recovered, and Carson's confession was only witnessed by staff, not impartial parties. So he might walk? For murder? Possibly. But he'll hang for the embezzlement. And Mr. Victor Ashford will too. Lena spoke up. What about Margaret Ashford? Davies looked at her. The missing woman? She's still out there, somewhere. If Carson's telling the truth, if he is, then she's been in hiding for 3 years. That's a long time to stay hidden. But not impossible. No, not impossible. Davies closed the ledger. I'll put out inquiries, check boarding houses, women's shelters, anywhere she might have gone. But Miss Whitaker, you need to prepare for the possibility that she's... Don't, Caleb said sharply. Don't say it. Davies nodded slowly. Very well. We'll hope for the best. He stood and gestured to his officers. Take them both. We'll hold them at the station until the magistrate arrives. They brought Carson and Victor through the library in shackles. Carson walked with his head high, expressionless. Victor fought every step, shouting about lawyers and false accusations and how Caleb would regret this. When they were gone, the library fell silent. Rose appeared in the doorway. Is it really over? Caleb sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. I think so. What happens now? I don't know. Lena stood. Her dress was still damp, her hair a mess, but she felt lighter than she had in weeks. Now, she said, we rebuild. The next 3 days were chaos. The magistrate arrived from the county seat, a stern woman named Blackwell, who took no nonsense and suffered no fools. She interviewed everyone, staff, neighbors, the doctor who'd examined Caleb's father's body 20 years ago. The records spoke for themselves. Carson had embezzled over 40,000 pounds across 3 decades. Victor had received nearly half of it through carefully disguised payments and consulting fees. The paper trail was immaculate. Ironically, Carson's meticulous record-keeping became the evidence that condemned him. The murder charge was harder. Without a body, without witnesses beyond the staff's testimony of Carson's confession, it came down to circumstantial evidence. But Blackwell was thorough. She interviewed the groundskeeper who'd found the body, the constable who'd ruled it suicide, the servants who'd been working the night Caleb's father died. Slowly, a picture emerged. Carson had been alone with the elder Mr. Ashford that night, had access to the lake, had motive, and had been the one to discover the body the next morning. On the fourth day, Blackwell announced her verdict. Carson Gray, you are charged with murder, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Victor Ashford, you are charged with embezzlement and conspiracy to commit fraud. Both of you will stand trial. They were taken away in a prison wagon, Carson silent to the end, Victor still shouting. Blackthorn felt different after they left. Lighter. Like a weight pressing down on the house had finally lifted. But Caleb was quieter than ever. Lena found him in his study that evening, staring at the fire. You should eat something, she said. I'm not hungry. When's the last time you slept? I don't remember. She sat in the chair across from him. Talk to me. About what? Whatever's eating you. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, she's alive. You don't know that. I do. I can feel it. She's out there somewhere, scared, hiding, thinking I've forgotten about her. Caleb, I need to find her. His voice cracked. I need to tell her she can come home. Lena reached across and took his hand. It was cold. Then we'll find her, she said. How? The same way we found everything else. We look. They started with the letters. Lena spread them across Caleb's desk. Every letter her grandmother had written to Margaret. Every letter Margaret had written back. Dozens of them, spanning years. They were close, Lena said, scanning the pages. Closer than employer and servant. This one, she held up a letter dated 1895. Margaret talks about feeling trapped, says her husband is kind but distant, that the house feels like a prison. My father wasn't distant. Maybe he was then. People change. She kept reading. More letters. More fragments of two women's lives preserved in fading ink. Then she found something. A letter from Margaret, dated 3 years ago, 2 weeks before she disappeared. Elizabeth, I know you're gone. I know you can't read this, but I'm writing anyway because I have no one else to tell. I found your archive, the one you hid in the chapel, every record, every piece of evidence you collected before you ran. It's all there. Carson knows I found it. I saw it in his eyes at dinner tonight. He knows, and he's planning something. I can feel it. I'm leaving. Tonight. I won't tell Caleb where I'm going. It's safer if he doesn't know. But I'm taking your evidence with me, all of it. And when the time is right, when I know he'll be safe, I'll send it to him. Tell your granddaughter, if she ever comes looking, that the truth is in the place where we said our vows. She'll understand. Melena's hands trembled. The chapel, she whispered. Caleb looked up. What? Your mother hid the evidence in the chapel, and she's telling my grandmother, telling me, that there's more. Something she took with her. What chapel? There's no chapel at Blackthorn. Not here. The place where we said our vows. Lena reread the line. She's not talking about a wedding. She's talking about something she and my grandmother did together. A promise. Caleb stood, suddenly energized. Where would they have made a promise? I don't know. But my grandmother left me something else. Lena pulled out the small locked box she'd brought from home, the one containing her grandmother's final possessions. She'd barely looked at it since arriving at Blackthorn. She opened it now. Inside were trinkets, a brooch, a handkerchief, a pressed flower, and at the bottom, wrapped in cloth, a small silver key. Not a door key. Something else. Lena turned it over. Engraved on the handle was a single word, sanctuary. There's a church, Caleb said suddenly. In the village, St. Catherine's. My mother used to go there every Sunday. She and my father were married there. How far? 3 miles. Then we go. Now. They took the carriage, just the two of them, driving through the dark with a single lamp to light the way. St. Catherine's sat on the edge of the village, small and stone and ancient. The door was unlocked. Country churches never locked their doors. Inside it smelled of old wood and candle wax. Lena held up the lamp, scanning the pews, the altar, the side chapels. What are we looking for? Caleb asked. Something that needs a key. They searched for 20 minutes, finding nothing. Then Lena noticed the floor. Near the altar, one stone was slightly raised, barely visible unless you were looking for it. She knelt and ran her fingers along the edge. A gap, just wide enough to fit the key. She inserted it and turned. The stone lifted. Beneath it was a hollow space, and inside the hollow was a metal box. Lena pulled it out, hands shaking. It wasn't locked. Inside were documents, legal papers, land deeds, bank records, and a journal. Margaret's journal. Lena opened it to the last entry. If you're reading this, you found it. Good. I'm writing this from a boarding house in Dover. I've been here 3 weeks. Carson doesn't know where I am. I've been careful, but I can't stay hidden forever. The evidence in this box is everything Elizabeth and I collected. Proof of theft, fraud, murder. Enough to destroy Carson and Victor both. I wanted to give it to Caleb myself, but I can't risk going back. Not until I know he's strong enough to handle what comes next. So I'm leaving it here. In the one place Carson would never think to look. The place where I married the love of my life. The place where I promised to protect our son, no matter what. Caleb, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to fight. But you are. You're stronger than your father, braver than me, and you'll finish what we started. I'll come home when it's safe. I love you. Mother, Caleb read the entry over Lena's shoulder. When he finished, he sank onto the nearest pew and put his head in his hands. She's alive, he said, voice breaking. She's in Dover. She was in Dover 3 years ago. Then we go to Dover. Caleb, I don't care how long it takes. I'll search every boarding house, every inn, every corner of that city until I find her. Lena sat beside him. Then I'll help you. He looked at her, eyes red. Why? You've done enough. You've risked everything. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not, but I owe her. She protected my grandmother, kept her safe when Carson would have killed her. Lena held up the journal. And she trusted me to finish this, so I will. Caleb pulled her into a fierce hug. She held him while he cried, silent, shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken. When he finally pulled away, his face was wet, but his eyes were clear. We leave tomorrow, he said. Agreed. They gathered the documents, locked the box, and left the church. Outside, the rain had stopped. Stars were beginning to break through the clouds. They were halfway back to the carriage when Lena saw movement in the shadows. Caleb, a figure stepped into the road. It was Victor. He was filthy, shackled wrists raw and bleeding, eyes wild. You, he snarled, you ruined everything. How did you? Escaped during transport, killed the guard. He held up a rock, dark with blood. And now I'm going to finish what Carson started. He lunged. Caleb shoved Lena aside and caught Victor's wrists. They went down in a tangle, struggling. Victor was bigger, heavier, driven by rage. He got a hand around Caleb's throat. Lena grabbed the rock and swung. It connected with Victor's skull with a sickening crack. He collapsed. Caleb scrambled back, gasping. Victor didn't move. Lena dropped the rock, staring at her hands. Is he? Caleb checked for a pulse. Unconscious, but alive. They tied him with the carriage reins and drove straight to the constable's station. Davies took one look at Victor, bloodied, raving, still trying to attack them even in chains, and locked him in the strongest cell they had. He'll stand trial for murdering that guard, Davies said grimly. And after what he just tried, there won't be any mercy. Caleb nodded, too exhausted to speak. They returned to Blackthorn as dawn broke over the hills. The house was quiet. Rose met them at the door, face pale. There's someone here, she said. Who? A woman. She arrived an hour ago, wouldn't give her name, just said she needed to see you. Caleb and Lena exchanged a look. They followed Rose to the drawing room. A woman sat by the fire, back to the door, thin, gray-haired, wrapped in a threadbare shawl. Hello? Caleb said. The woman turned. Lena heard Caleb's breath catch. It was Margaret, older, thinner, worn by years of hiding, but unmistakably her. Mother, Caleb whispered. Margaret stood slowly, tears streaming down her face. I heard what you did, she said. I heard you arrested Carson, that you found the evidence, that you... Her voice broke. That you didn't give up. Caleb crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against him, sobbing. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry." "You're home," Caleb said. "That's all that matters." Lena stood in the doorway watching them, feeling something tight in her chest finally loosen. Rose appeared beside her. "Is that really her?" the girl whispered. "Yes." "Then it's really over." "Yes," Lena said again. "It's really over." But even as she said it, she saw the look in Margaret's eyes when she finally pulled away from Caleb, haunted, terrified, like she was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. "What is it?" Caleb asked. Margaret's hands shook. "There's something I didn't tell you, something I couldn't put in the journal." "What?" "Carson had an accomplice, someone inside the house, someone who's still here." The warmth drained from the room. "Who?" Lena demanded. Margaret looked at her with hollow eyes. "I don't know," she whispered. "I never found out. But they're the reason I ran, the reason I stayed hidden, because whoever it is, they're still watching." A floorboard creaked in the hallway. They all spun around. No one was there, but the front door stood open, rain blowing in. And in the distance, barely visible through the storm, a figure ran into the darkness. Caleb reached the door first, rain stinging his face as he stared into the darkness. The figure was gone, swallowed by the storm and the night. "Who was that?" he shouted back into the house. No one answered. Margaret grabbed his arm, fingers digging in hard. "Don't go after them, please. That's what they want." "Mother, if someone's been working with Carson all this time, then they're dangerous and desperate." Her voice shook. "I saw them once, 3 years ago, the night I ran. I couldn't see their face, but I heard them talking to Carson in the library. Planning. They knew everything, where I'd hidden the evidence, when I was going to leave, if I hadn't run when I did." Lena pulled the door shut and locked it. Her mind was racing, cataloging everyone in the house. "How many staff are here right now?" Rose stepped forward, pale but steady. 6 of us. Me, Marjorie, Tom, and 3 day workers. Anna, Peter, and old Samuel. "Samuel's back?" Lena asked sharply. "Returned 2 days ago. Said he'd been visiting family in Wales." Caleb and Lena exchanged a look. "Get everyone into the drawing room," Caleb said. "Now. No one leaves until we figure out who just ran." Rose hesitated. "Sir, if we accuse the wrong person, I'm not accusing anyone yet, but someone in this house has been lying to us, and I want to know who." 10 minutes later, they were all assembled. Marjorie stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, face flushed with indignation. Tom leaned against the wall, shovel still in hand from earlier. The 3 day workers, Anna, a young maid with nervous hands, Peter, a stable boy barely 18, and Samuel, the groundskeeper who'd supposedly been gone for months, clustered together near the door. Margaret sat in a chair, Lena standing beside her. Caleb positioned himself between the staff and the exit. "Someone ran from this house 5 minutes ago," Caleb said. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "I want to know who." Silence. "We were all here," Marjorie said defensively. "In the servants' hall. We heard you come in with the mistress and stayed out of the way, like we're supposed to." "All of you?" "Yes." Caleb turned to Samuel. "You've been gone for months. Why come back now?" Samuel was a wiry man in his 60s, weathered face half hidden by a gray beard. He met Caleb's eyes without flinching. "My sister died. I came back because I needed the work." Convenient timing. "Sir, I don't know what you're implying." "I'm implying that someone in this room has been feeding information to Carson for years. Someone who knew when my mother was planning to leave. Someone who's been covering their tracks." Caleb's voice rose. "And that person just tried to run." "It wasn't me," Samuel said flatly. "Then who was it?" Before anyone could answer, Margaret spoke up. "It was a woman." Everyone turned to look at her. "The person I heard talking to Carson 3 years ago. It was a woman's voice. I'm certain of it." The room shifted. Tom and Peter visibly relaxed. Samuel's expression didn't change. That left Marjorie, Rose, and Anna. "You think one of us betrayed you?" Marjorie's voice was ice. "After everything we've been through? After what we did to help you catch Carson?" "I think someone's been playing both sides," Lena said carefully. "And they're scared now because Margaret's back and they know we're going to find out." Anna started crying. I didn't do anything. I swear. I've only been here 6 months, which makes you the least likely, Caleb said. He turned to Rose. You brought us the ledgers. You risked everything to help. Rose nodded, mute. That leaves you, Marjorie. The cook's face went purple. How dare you? I've worked at Blackthorn for 20 years, 20 years of loyalty, and this is how you repay me? Then explain something to me, Lena said. When I first arrived, you barely spoke to me, wouldn't look at me during meals, seemed angry that I was here. Why? Because seamstresses don't last at Blackthorn. I didn't want to get attached. Or because you knew why I was really here. Marjorie's hands clenched into fists. I don't know what you're talking about. My grandmother's name was Elizabeth Carr. She worked here 30 years ago. You would have been here then. Did you know her? Something flickered across Marjorie's face. Barely. She kept to herself. That's a lie, Margaret said quietly. Elizabeth and Marjorie were friends. I saw them together constantly. In the kitchen, the garden, everywhere. Marjorie's jaw tightened. Fine. We were friends. So what? So when Elizabeth ran, you must have wondered why, Lena said. Must have asked questions. Unless you already knew the answer. I didn't. Carson paid her off. 200 pounds. Marked as severance in the ledgers. That's a fortune for a housekeeper. Lena took a step closer. Did he pay you too, Marjorie? To keep quiet about what you knew? Get out of my face. How much did he give you? I said get out. Did you know he was going to kill Mr. Ashford? Lena's voice cracked like a whip. Did you help him? Marjorie lunged. Tom caught her, arms wrapping around her shoulders as she thrashed. Let me go! Not until you calm down, Tom said. I didn't kill anyone. Marjorie was shaking, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know what Carson was planning. I swear. Elizabeth told me she found something in the books, something bad. She asked me to help her make copies, and I did. But then Carson found out, and he... She choked on the words. He threatened my daughter. Said if I didn't keep my mouth shut, he'd make sure she never found work anywhere. She was 14. I had to protect her. The room went silent. So you took his money and stayed quiet, Caleb said. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when you're poor. Not when you have a child to feed. Marjorie looked at Margaret, eyes hollow. I'm sorry. I should have spoken up when you started asking questions, but I was scared. And by the time I realized what Carson was capable of, it was too late. Margaret stood slowly and crossed to Marjorie. For a moment, Lena thought she might slap her. Instead, she pulled the woman into a hug. I forgive you, Margaret whispered. Marjorie collapsed against her, sobbing. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, exhausted. If it wasn't Marjorie who ran, then who? A crash echoed from somewhere upstairs. Everyone froze. Stay here, Caleb said, grabbing the lamp. Lena followed him anyway. They climbed the stairs quickly, quietly. The sound had come from the east wing, Carson's old office. The door was ajar, lamplight spilling out. Caleb pushed it open. Inside, someone was rifling through the desk drawers, pulling out papers and shoving them into a bag. It was Anna. The young maid spun around, eyes wide. I was just what? Caleb demanded. Stealing evidence? No, I was trying to help. By running when my mother mentioned a woman accomplice? Anna's face crumpled. Please, you don't understand. I didn't want to do it. Lena moved to block the door. Do what? Carson made me. When I started here 6 months ago, he found out I had a brother in debtor's prison. Said if I didn't report back to him about what you were doing, he'd make sure my brother never got out. Tears poured down her cheeks. I didn't know he was stealing. I thought he just wanted to keep track of the household. But then you started asking questions, and he got scared, and he told me to watch you, follow you, report everything you did. You told him I went to his office that night, Lena said. Anna nodded miserably. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But he said if I didn't, my brother would die in that prison. Caleb took the bag from her hands and dumped it on the desk. Letters, documents, old ledgers, all the things they'd already found and cataloged. What were you going to do with these? He asked. Destroy them. Carson sent word from the jail. Said if I didn't get rid of the evidence, his lawyer would make sure I went down with him, that I'd be charged as an accomplice. So you were going to burn decades of proof to save yourself. To save my brother. Anna's voice broke. He's 16 years old. He's going to die in there if someone doesn't help him. Lena felt something twist in her chest. She knew that desperation, that impossible choice between loyalty and survival. How much does your brother owe? She asked quietly. Anna looked up, confused. What? The debt. How much? 40 pounds, but we'll never... I'll pay it. Everyone stared at Lena. What? Caleb said. I'll pay the debt. 40 pounds. In exchange, Anna tells us everything she told Carson, every conversation, every detail, and she testifies against him in court. Anna's hands flew to her mouth. You'd do that? Why? Because I know what it's like to be trapped, and because you deserve a second chance. Lena glanced at Caleb. We all do. Caleb studied Anna for a long moment, then nodded. Agreed. But if you lie to us, if you hold anything back, the deal's off. I won't. I swear. Anna sank into a chair. What do you want to know? They spent the next hour extracting everything Anna knew. It wasn't much. Carson had been careful, only using her for surveillance, never telling her the full scope of what he was doing. But she'd overheard conversations, seen letters, knew that Carson had been in contact with someone in London, someone who'd been helping him move stolen money. He had a ledger, Anna said. A private one. Not like the ones in the files. This one had names, dates, amounts. He kept it locked in a safe in his bedroom. We searched his bedroom, Caleb said. There was no safe. It's hidden. Behind the mirror over his washstand. You have to press the frame in a certain spot. Caleb and Lena were on their feet immediately. They found Carson's bedroom on the 3rd floor, austere and cold. The mirror hung exactly where Anna had described. Lena pressed along the frame, feeling for a mechanism. Click. The mirror swung open, revealing a small wall safe. We need the combination, Caleb said. Or we break it open, Lena replied. It took Tom and his shovel 15 minutes to crack the safe door. Inside was a single leather-bound ledger. Caleb opened it carefully. The pages were filled with names, dates, and amounts. A complete record of Carson's theft, going back 40 years. But that wasn't what made Caleb go pale. It was the final entry. April 1926. Payment to MH for services rendered. 500 pounds. MH, Lena breathed. Who's MH? Margaret appeared in the doorway. She'd followed them up, along with Rose and Marjorie. Let me see, she said. Caleb handed her the ledger. Margaret flipped through the pages, face draining of color with each entry. These names, she whispered. These are all people Carson blackmailed or paid off over the years. Servants, tradesmen, officials. She stopped on a page near the middle. Here, 1899, MH, first payment, 100 pounds. Mother, who is MH? Margaret's hands trembled. Martha Hargrave, the seamstress who worked here before Lena, the one who fell down the stairs. The room went cold. Carson had her on the payroll for years, Margaret continued. Small amounts, regular payments, and then suddenly, she flipped ahead. Nothing. The payments stopped 3 months ago, right before she died. She knew too much, Lena said. Carson was paying her to stay quiet, and when he realized we were getting close to the truth, he couldn't risk her talking. So he pushed her, Rose whispered. No one contradicted her. Caleb took the ledger back and kept reading. More names, more payments, more evidence of just how deep Carson's corruption ran. And then, on the very last page, he found something that made his breath catch. There's a letter, he said, stuck in the back. He pulled it out carefully. The paper was old, yellowed, but the handwriting was familiar. His father's handwriting. Carson, I know what you've been doing. I've known for months, but I gave you a chance to explain, and you lied to my face. I'm going to the constable tomorrow morning. I'm showing him the ledgers, the records, everything. And when he arrests you, I want you to know that I take no pleasure in this. You've been like family to me, but family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. You brought this on yourself. Richard Ashford. The letter was dated the day before Caleb's father died. He was going to turn Carson in, Caleb said, voice hollow. The next morning. That's why Carson killed him. Margaret took the letter with shaking hands. He never showed me this. I didn't know he'd confronted Carson. Because Carson made sure you wouldn't find out. Lena pointed to the date. He killed your husband, staged it as a suicide, and then spent the next 20 years making sure no one questioned it. Until I started asking questions, Margaret said. And then you ran before he could do to you what he did to your husband. Margaret folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her pocket. This ends now. Tomorrow, we take everything to the magistrate. Every ledger, every letter, every piece of evidence. And we make sure Carson and Victor never hurt anyone again. The magistrate returned to Blackthorn the following morning with 2 constables and a legal clerk. Blackwell was a tall woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that could cut glass. She sat in the library and spent 4 hours reviewing every document they'd found. The ledgers, the letters, the confession from Anna, Martha Hargrave's employment records showing she'd been on Carson's private payroll for decades, and the letter from Richard Ashford, written the day before he died. When Blackwell finally looked up, her expression was grim. This is the most comprehensive case of fraud and conspiracy I've seen in 30 years of practice, she said. Mr. Gray's ledger alone is enough to hang him. Add the murder of Richard Ashford, the attempted murder of Margaret Ashford, and the death of Martha Hargrave. She shook her head. He'll never see daylight again? What about Victor? Caleb asked. Mr. Victor Ashford is facing his own set of charges for the murder of the transport guard and attempted assault on you and Miss Whitaker. Combined with the embezzlement charges, he's looking at life in prison, possibly execution, depending on how the trial goes. And the estate? Blackwell leaned back in her chair. That's more complicated. Carson embezzled over 40,000 pounds across 30 years. Some of it can be recovered from his personal accounts and assets, but most of it, she spread her hands. It's gone. Spent, hidden, or laundered so thoroughly, we'll never trace it. Caleb's jaw tightened. So Blackthorn is bankrupt. Not quite. You still own the land, the house, the surrounding properties, but the liquid assets are depleted. You'll need to make some hard decisions about what to sell, what to keep, and how to move forward. I'm not selling. Then you'll need to find another source of income. The estate can't sustain itself on what's left. Lena spoke up. What if we turned it into something else? Everyone looked at her. The house is beautiful, she continued. Historic. People pay to stay in places like this. We could open it as a country inn, or a school, or lease out sections for events. Blackwell raised an eyebrow. That's ambitious. So is everything else we've done. Caleb was staring at Lena like he was seeing her for the first time. You want to stay? Do you want me to leave? No, but I thought, after everything, you'd want to get as far from Blackthorn as possible. Lena smiled. I came here to find the truth. I found it. Now I want to help build something better. Margaret reached over and squeezed Lena's hand. I think that's a wonderful idea. Blackwell gathered her papers. Very well. I'll prepare the official charges against Carson Gray and Victor Ashford. The trial will be held at the county seat in 2 weeks. You'll all be called to testify. We'll be there, Caleb said. After Blackwell left, the house felt different, lighter. Like a weight that had been pressing down on the walls for decades had finally lifted. Rose brought tea to the library, and they all sat together. Caleb, Lena, Margaret, Rose, Tom, Marjorie, even Anna, who'd been allowed to stay after her confession. So what happens now? Rose asked. Caleb looked around at the faces surrounding him. People who'd risked everything to help him uncover the truth, who'd stood with him when it would have been easier to run. Now, he said, we rebuild. Together. The trial lasted 3 days. Carson sat in the dock, stone-faced, while witness after witness testified against him. The servants. The magistrate. The constable who'd originally ruled Richard Ashford's death a suicide, now admitting under oath that Carson had pressured him to close the case quickly. Anna testified about the blackmail, the surveillance, the fear that had kept her silent. Margaret testified about the night she'd fled, the voices she'd heard, the terror that had driven her into hiding for 3 years. And Caleb testified about the coat, the ledgers, the systematic destruction of his family. On the 3rd day, the jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Carson was sentenced to hang. Victor, tried separately for the murder of the transport guard, received the same sentence. When the verdicts were read, Carson finally showed emotion. He looked directly at Caleb, eyes blazing with hatred. You've destroyed everything, he said. No, Caleb replied quietly. You did that yourself. They returned to Blackthorn a week later. The house was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not oppressive, just still, like it was waiting to see what came next. Lena spent the first day walking the grounds with Margaret, discussing plans, which rooms could be converted into guest quarters, where they could add a kitchen garden, how to restore the formal gardens without breaking the budget. You're really going to stay? Margaret asked. If you'll have me. My dear, I'd be honored. Margaret paused near the rose garden, looking back at the house. You know, when I left, I thought I'd never see this place again. Thought I'd die in some anonymous boarding house, forgotten. But you came back, because I heard what you and Caleb did, how you refused to give up, how you fought for the truth even when it would have been easier to walk away. She turned to Lena. You remind me of Elizabeth. She had that same fire, that same refusal to accept injustice. I wish I'd known her better. She would have been proud of you. They stood there for a moment, watching the sun set over the estate. Then Margaret linked her arm through Lena's, and they walked back to the house together. But that night, Caleb found Lena in the sewing room. She'd moved her workspace down from the cramped attic to a larger room on the second floor, with better light and more space. She was working on new curtains for the drawing room, needle flying through the fabric with practiced ease. You're still at it, Caleb said from the doorway. Old habits. He came in and sat in the chair across from her. The coat, his father's coat now fully restored, hung on a mannequin in the corner. I wanted to thank you, he said. For what? For everything. For coming here. For not leaving when anyone with sense would have run. For helping me find the truth. I didn't do it alone. No, but you started it. You're the one who had the courage to ask the first question. Lena set down her needle. Do you regret it? Knowing what happened to your father, to your mother? Caleb was quiet for a moment. I regret that it took so long. That Carson got away with it for 30 years. That my mother had to live in fear and hiding. He looked at her. But I don't regret knowing. The truth is better than the lie, even when it hurts. And now? Now we move forward. Turn this place into something my father would be proud of. He smiled slightly. Something that doesn't require me to lie awake at night wondering who's stealing from me. Lena laughed. That's a low bar. I'm starting small. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Lena stitching, Caleb watching the fire. I got a letter from Anna today, Lena said eventually. Her brother's been released. She's taking him to stay with family in the north, starting over. That's good. She said to thank you for giving her a second chance. I didn't do anything. That was all you. We did it together. Caleb stood and crossed to the window. Outside, Blackthorn's grounds stretched into darkness, but for the first time in his memory, the darkness didn't feel threatening. Do you think we can really make this work? He asked. The in idea? I don't know, but I think we have to try. He turned back to her. Then let's try. What? The next morning, Caleb called a meeting in the library. All the staff were there, along with Margaret and Lena. I've been thinking about what comes next, Caleb said. This house has been shrouded in lies and fear for too long. I want to change that, but I can't do it alone. He looked around at the faces watching him. I'm proposing we turn Blackthorn into a country inn, open it to travelers, offer rooms and meals, use the grounds for events. It won't be easy. We'll all have to work harder than we ever have. But if we do this right, we can build something lasting, something honest. What about us? Tom asked. The staff? You stay, all of you. Same positions, better wages. And when the inn starts turning a profit, you'll all share in it. Marjorie spoke up. You're offering us partnership? I'm offering you a future. One where you're not afraid. Where you're valued for your work, not controlled by it. Rose's eyes were bright with tears. I'll stay. Me too, Tom said. One by one, the others agreed. Only Marjorie hesitated. I have one condition. Name it. My daughter. She's 18 now, looking for work. I want her to have a place here. A real place. With real opportunities. Caleb smiled. Done. Marjorie exhaled slowly, then nodded. Then I'm in. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It took months of work, scrubbing floors, repairing walls, replacing furniture that had rotted from years of neglect. They sold off pieces they didn't need to fund the renovations. Paintings, silver, antique furniture. Anything that could bring in money without compromising the house's character. Lena worked alongside the staff, sewing new linens and curtains, designing spaces that felt warm instead of oppressive. She taught Rose embroidery, turned one of the unused rooms into a proper workshop. Margaret managed the finances with the help of an accountant from the village, someone with no connection to Carson or Victor. Every penny was tracked, every expense justified. And Caleb threw himself into restoration with a focus that bordered on obsession. He repaired the gardens himself, hauling stones and digging trenches, replaced broken windows, refinished floors. At night, he collapsed into bed exhausted and woke before dawn to start again. But slowly Blackthorn began to change. The darkness lifted. The silence became peaceful instead of menacing. Rooms that had been closed for years were opened, aired out, filled with light. 6 months after Carson's execution, they opened for their first guests, a couple from London looking for a quiet retreat. They stayed 3 days, and when they left, they told Caleb it was the most beautiful place they'd ever visited. More guests followed. Word spread. A country estate with a tragic past and a hopeful future. People came for the scenery, the history, the promise of something authentic. And Blackthorn thrived. A year to the day after Lena first arrived, she stood in the entrance hall and barely recognized the place. The floors gleamed, fresh flowers sat in vases on every table. Guests laughed in the dining room, enjoying Marjorie's cooking. Rose moved between tables with practiced grace, no longer the frightened girl who'd warned Lena to leave. Caleb found her there, lost in thought. "Remembering?" he asked. "Everything." She gestured to the hall. "This place was a tomb when I arrived. Now look at it. Now it's alive. Because people chose to make it that way." He took her hand. "Because you chose to stay." They stood together, watching the life unfold around them. The guests, the staff, the house itself seeming to breathe easier. "Thank you," Caleb said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing what this place could be. For believing it was worth saving." Lena squeezed his hand. "We saved each other." And in that moment, standing in the house that had tried so hard to break them, they both knew it was true. Blackthorn had been a place of secrets and silence for too long. Now, finally, it was home. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in late autumn, 18 months after Carson's execution. Lena was in the garden, supervising the last of the harvest, when Rose brought it to her, the girl's face unreadable. "It's from London," Rose said, "for you and Mr. Ashford both." Lena wiped dirt from her hands and took the paper. "Matter requiring immediate attention. Stop estate of Victor Ashford. Stop arrival Thursday. Stop. Solicitor James Worthing." She read it twice, pulse quickening. "What does it mean?" Rose asked. "I don't know, but we're about to find out." Yeah. Thursday came gray and wet, the kind of rain that settled in for days. Lena and Caleb waited in the library while Margaret paced near the window. The inn had 6 guests staying, a family from Manchester and an elderly couple celebrating their anniversary. But they'd been settled in the East Wing, far from whatever conversation was about to unfold. The solicitor arrived precisely at noon. James Worthing was younger than Lena expected, maybe 40, with the kind of careful grooming that spoke of London offices and expensive tailors. He carried a leather case and wore an expression that gave nothing away. "Mr. Ashford, Miss Whitaker, Mrs. Ashford." He nodded to each of them. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice." "Your telegram didn't give us much choice," Caleb said. "What's this about?" Worthing set his case on the desk and opened it with practiced efficiency. "I represent the estate of Victor Ashford. As you know, he was executed 6 months ago for murder and embezzlement." "We know. What you may not know is that Mr. Ashford maintained several properties and accounts in London. Upon his death, those assets were frozen pending resolution of his debts and legal obligations." Worthing pulled out a sheaf of papers. "That resolution has now been completed." "Meaning what?" Lena asked. "Meaning that after all debts were settled, there remained a substantial sum, Nearly 8,000 pounds. The room went silent. That's impossible, Caleb said. Victor stole from this estate for 30 years. Where would he get 8,000 pounds? From investments, primarily. Your uncle was many things, Mr. Ashford, but he wasn't stupid. He took the money he embezzled and invested it. Property, stocks, bonds. Some of those investments performed quite well. Margaret's voice was sharp. So he got rich off stolen money, and now what? The government keeps it? No, madam. That's why I'm here. Worthing slid a document across the desk. Victor Ashford died without a will. Under the law, his assets passed to his closest living relative. That would be you, Mr. Ashford. Caleb stared at the paper like it might bite him. You're saying I inherit the money he stole from my family? Legally, yes. The funds are yours. I don't want it. Caleb, Margaret started. I don't want his blood money. Caleb's voice was hard. Everything he touched was corrupted. I won't. It's 8,000 pounds, Lena said quietly. Enough to finish the renovations. Enough to secure the inn's future. Enough to pay back everyone he hurt. Caleb looked at her, jaw tight. You can't be serious. I'm practical. Victor's dead. Carson's dead. That money exists whether you take it or not. The question is what you do with it. Worthing cleared his throat. If you refuse the inheritance, the funds will revert to the crown. You have 30 days to decide. I need 10 minutes. Caleb stood abruptly and walked out. Lena found him in the rose garden, standing in the rain without a coat. He killed my father, Caleb said without turning around. He terrorized my mother. He stole everything. And now I'm supposed to just take his money and say thank you. No. Lena moved to stand beside him. You're supposed to take it and use it to build something he could never destroy. It feels wrong. It is wrong. All of it. But the money exists. And we can either let the government take it, or we can use it to help the people he hurt. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, rain dripping from his hair. What would you do with it? Honestly, I'd split it 3 ways. 1/3 for the estate to finish what we started. 1/3 distributed among the staff, compensation for years of fear and exploitation, and 1/3 set aside for a fund. For people like Anna, people trapped by circumstances beyond their control who just need someone to believe in them. He turned to look at her finally. You've thought about this. I've thought about everything. It's what I do. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You're better than I am. I'm more practical. There's a difference. They stood there together, the rain washing over them, the house looming behind. All right, Caleb said finally. We do it your way. Huts. The distribution of Victor's estate took another month. Worthing handled the legal details while Lena and Margaret worked out the specifics. Each staff member received a payment based on their years of service. Marjorie wept when she saw the amount, enough to pay off her late husband's debts and set aside money for her daughter's future. Rose stared at her check in disbelief, then immediately asked if she could use part of it to take classes in hotel management. You don't need my permission, Caleb told her. I want to be better at this, Rose said. I want to help run things properly. Then do it. Tom used his share to buy new equipment for the grounds. Anna sent word from the north that her brother was enrolled in school and they were both doing well. The others spent their money on family, on savings, on the quiet security of knowing they weren't one disaster away from ruin. The fund was established through a local solicitor, a trust that would provide emergency assistance to people facing debtor's prison or other financial hardship. Lena insisted her grandmother's name be attached to it. The Elizabeth Carr Trust, she said, for people who need a second chance. The remaining money went into Blackthorn's accounts. They used it to repair the roof, update the plumbing, install proper heating in the guest rooms. The house had been beautiful before, in a haunted, fragile way. Now it was becoming solid, permanent, real. But spring came early that year. The gardens exploded into color, roses and lavender and foxglove, all tended by Tom and a crew of local workers he'd hired. The inn was fully booked through summer, with reservations coming in from as far as Edinburgh and Paris. Blackthorn had become something people traveled to see, not because of its tragedy, though the story had spread, but because of what it had become after. A place that had been broken and chose to rebuild. A house that had survived its own history. Lena stood in the entrance hall one morning, watching Rose train a new maid in the proper way to set a table. The girl was nervous, dropping a fork twice, but Rose was patient, kind. Nothing like the terrified teenager who'd warned Lena to leave all those months ago. "She's good at this," Margaret said, appearing at Lena's elbow. "She is. Better than I expected. She learned from the best." Lena glanced at her. "I'm a seamstress, not a teacher." "You're both, whether you admit it or not." Margaret linked her arm through Lena's. "Walk with me?" They went out to the grounds, following the path toward the lake. It was the first time Lena had been there since learning what happened to Caleb's father. The water still made her uneasy. "I know what you're thinking," Margaret said, "that this place is cursed, that too much pain happened here." "Didn't it?" "Yes, but pain doesn't make a place evil. What matters is what we do after." She stopped at the edge of the lake. "Richard died here, but he also proposed to me here on a summer evening 30 years ago. He taught Caleb to fish in this water. We had picnics on that bank. And Carson drowned him right there." "Yes, both things are true." Margaret's voice was steady. "I could hate this lake, avoid it, drain it, or I can remember that the good existed too, that the evil didn't erase everything that came before." Lena looked at the water, trying to see it through Margaret's eyes. It was just a lake, stone and water and reflected sky. What happened here was done by people, not the place itself. "How do you do it?" Lena asked. "Forgive, I mean, after everything they took from you." "I don't forgive them. Carson and Victor can rot for what they did." Margaret's jaw tightened. "But I forgive myself for not seeing it sooner, for running instead of fighting, for the years I wasted hiding when I should have come home. You were protecting yourself. I was scared, and that's all right. Fear is human, but so is courage. And eventually you have to choose which one wins." They stood there in the morning light, two women who'd been shaped by loss and rebuilt by choice. "Thank you," Lena said quietly. "For what?" "For trusting me. For letting me be part of this." Margaret pulled her close. "You're not part of it, dear. You're family." The first anniversary of the inn's opening fell on a Saturday in June. They'd planned a celebration, a garden party for guests and staff, food and music, a chance to mark how far they'd come. Tom had strung lanterns through the trees. Marjorie had been cooking for days. Rose had organized games for the children. Caleb stood on the terrace watching preparations, looking more relaxed than Lena had ever seen him. He'd put on weight, lost the hollow-eyed exhaustion that had defined him when they first met. His hair was longer, sun-bleached at the ends. He looked younger, happy. "Nervous?" Lena asked, joining him. "Terrified. What if no one comes?" "Caleb, we have 40 people confirmed. What if the food runs out?" "Marjorie made enough to feed an army." "What if—" "Stop." She took his hand. "It's going to be perfect." "Nothing's perfect." "Then it'll be perfectly imperfect." "Which is better anyway." He laughed, squeezing her fingers. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You're just finally listening." The guests began arriving around noon. Families from the village, business owners who'd helped with the renovations, the solicitor Worthing who'd brought Victor's inheritance. Even the magistrate Blackwell made an appearance, stern as ever, but clearly pleased with how things had turned out. The gardens filled with voices and laughter. Children ran through the roses while adults stood in clusters, drinking wine and sharing stories. The staff moved among them easily. No longer servants, but hosts. Partners in something larger than any of them. Lena found herself talking to a woman from the village, a baker who'd supplied bread to the inn since the beginning. "You've done something remarkable here," the woman said. "The whole county's talking about it, how you turned this place around. We all did it together." "Maybe. But it started with you and Mr. Ashford, having the courage to face what was hidden." She lowered her voice. "My husband worked here years ago, under Carson. He was terrified every day. When I heard what happened, what you uncovered, I wept. Because finally, someone stood up to that monster." Lena didn't know what to say. She'd never thought of herself as courageous, just stubborn, unwilling to let questions go unanswered. "Thank you," she managed finally. The woman smiled and moved on. More conversations followed. More gratitude, more stories of people who'd been touched by Carson's cruelty and were grateful someone had finally stopped him. By evening, Lena's head was spinning. She slipped away from the party, seeking quiet, and found herself in the library. The room was empty, peaceful. She sank into her favorite chair and closed her eyes. Hiding? She opened her eyes. Caleb stood in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of wine. Resting, she corrected, accepting a glass. It's been a long day. Good long or bad long? Good. Overwhelming, but good. She sipped the wine. People keep thanking me, like I did something extraordinary. You did? I just asked questions. Lena. He sat across from her. You came to a strange house, confronted dangerous men, risked your life multiple times, and refused to leave even when it would have been safer. That's not just asking questions. That's heroism. I'm not a hero. Neither am I. But together, we changed everything. He raised his glass. To asking questions. To finding answers, she replied. They drank in comfortable silence. Outside, the party continued. Music drifted through the open windows, laughter echoing off the old stones. Do you ever think about leaving? Caleb asked. Blackthorn? No, why? Because you could. You've proven yourself. You could go anywhere, do anything. Start your own business, work for someone prestigious. You're not tied here. Lena set down her glass. Is this your way of asking me to leave? What? No, I'm asking why you stay. Because this is home. The words came out simple, true. She'd arrived at Blackthorn with nothing but a bag and her grandmother's letters. She'd been looking for answers, for closure, for some understanding of why her grandmother had run. She'd found all of that, but she'd also found something else. Purpose. Family. A place where her particular brand of stubbornness was valued instead of tolerated. Besides, she added, someone needs to make sure you don't burn the place down with your terrible ideas. He laughed. I don't have terrible ideas. You wanted to put a fountain in the drawing room. That would have been elegant. It would have leaked and ruined the floors. You don't know that. I absolutely know that. They were still arguing, laughing, when Margaret appeared. There you two are. We're about to do the toast. They followed her back outside, where the sun was setting in layers of gold and pink. Tom had gathered everyone in the garden, staff and guests mingling together. Caleb stepped forward, raising his glass. I'm not good at speeches, he started. Then keep it short, someone called, and everyone laughed. Right. Short. He cleared his throat. A year ago, this house was dying, poisoned by lies, held together by fear. Most of you know the story. What Carson did. What my uncle did. The people they hurt. The laughter faded. People nodded, remembering. But that's not the whole story. Because after they were gone, we had a choice. Let Blackthorn die with them, or fight to save it. He gestured to the house, the gardens, the people surrounding him. We chose to fight, and we won. Not just against Carson or Victor, against the idea that broken things can't be fixed, that damaged places are beyond saving. He looked at Lena, and she saw emotion shining in his eyes. This house is whole again because of everyone here, the staff who stayed when it would have been easier to leave, the tradespeople who worked for promises instead of payment, the guests who took a chance on an inn with a dark past. He raised his glass higher, and especially to Lena Whitaker, who walked into a nightmare and decided it was worth fixing. Everyone turned to look at her. Lena felt her face flush. I didn't do it alone. No, Caleb agreed. But you did it first. So here's to the woman who asked questions when everyone else was too afraid, who saw what this place could be and made us believe it too. To Lena! Someone shouted. The cry was taken up by others. To Lena! To Blackthorn! They drank, and Lena blinked back tears. Rose appeared at her elbow, grinning. You're going to have to make a speech too. Absolutely not. Too late. They're waiting. Lena looked around at the expectant faces. People she'd come to know, to care about. Her family in every way that mattered. She took a breath. When I first arrived at Blackthorn, I was looking for answers about my grandmother, about why she'd run from this place and never looked back. Her voice steadied as she continued. I thought understanding her story would help me understand mine, and it did, but not in the way I expected. She glanced at Caleb, at Margaret, at the staff gathered close. I learned that running doesn't solve anything, that fear is a choice just like courage, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay in a broken place and fight to make it whole. She raised her glass. My grandmother ran because she didn't have the support we have now, because she was alone and terrified and saw no other option. But we're not alone, we have each other, and that makes all the difference. She lifted her glass higher, to Elizabeth Carr, who survived when survival was the only option, and to all of us who chose something better. The toast echoed across the garden. People drank, embraced, wept openly. Marjorie pulled Lena into a fierce hug. Your grandmother would be so proud. I hope so. The party continued late into the night, music and dancing, food and stories. Children fell asleep in their parents' arms while adults lingered over wine and conversation. Lena found herself dancing with Caleb under the lantern-lit trees, his hand warm on her waist. I meant what I said, he murmured. You saved this place. We saved each other. Is that what we did? She looked up at him, really looked, at the man who'd been cold and guarded when they first met, who'd slowly thawed into someone warm and open, someone who laughed easily now, who trusted his staff, who'd learned that strength didn't mean doing everything alone. Yes, she said, that's exactly what we did. He pulled her closer, and they swayed together in the summer dark. The seasons turned. Autumn brought a different kind of guests, writers seeking quiet, artists chasing light, elderly couples looking for peace. The inn developed a reputation as a place of healing, somewhere people came to recover from loss or change, or the simple exhaustion of living. Winter was slower but steady. They hosted Christmas parties for the village, hired more local workers, expanded the kitchen garden. Margaret took over most of the day-to-day management, freeing Caleb to focus on long-term planning and Lena to develop new programs. Sewing classes for local women, apprenticeships for young people seeking skills. The Elizabeth Carr Trust funded 3 families through financial crises, keeping them out of debtor's prison and helping them rebuild. And through it all, Blackthorn thrived. Not perfectly. There were setbacks. A pipe burst in January, flooding 2 guest rooms. A kitchen fire in March caused minor damage. Rose got sick with pneumonia and was bedridden for weeks. But they handled each crisis together, fixed what broke, supported who fell, kept moving forward. By the time spring returned, the house felt settled. Solid. Like it had always been this way, like the dark years under Carson were a nightmare from someone else's life. Seeing it. 2 years after Lena's arrival, a letter came. It was addressed to Lena Whitaker, sent from Dover, written in a hand she didn't recognize. She opened it in the library, Caleb reading over her shoulder. Dear Miss Whitaker, my name is Sarah Mills. I'm writing on behalf of my mother, who passed away last week at the age of 76. Among her effects, I found letters addressed to a Margaret Ashford of Blackthorn Estate. The letters mentioned your grandmother, Elizabeth Carr, and detailed events from many years ago. My mother's name was Dorothy Barnes. She worked at Blackthorn briefly in 1895, the same time as your grandmother. They were friends. Before she died, my mother asked me to write to you if I ever discovered what happened to Elizabeth. She said if anyone deserved to know the whole truth, it was Elizabeth's family. I've enclosed a letter my mother wrote but never sent. She hoped Elizabeth was still alive to read it. Since she's not, I hope you'll accept it in her place. With sympathy, Sarah Mills, Lena's hands trembled as she unfolded the second letter. It was yellowed, fragile, dated 30 years prior. Dearest Elizabeth, I heard you made it out, that you're safe. I'm so glad. I'm writing this even though I don't know if I'll ever send it, but I need to put the word somewhere and maybe someday they'll find you. You were right to run. Carson would have killed you, just like he killed Mr. Ashford. I saw it happen. I was in the garden that night, couldn't sleep, and I heard shouting by the lake. I hid in the hedges and watched. Carson held him under the water. Mr. Ashford fought, but Carson was stronger. When it was over, he weighted the body with stones and left it there to be found in the morning. I should have spoken up, should have gone to the constable, but I was terrified. I had 3 children and no husband. If I accused Carson, he'd destroy me. So I kept silent. And I've lived with that shame every day since. You were braver than me, Elizabeth. You gathered evidence, risked everything to expose the truth. When you ran, I understood, because Carson would have done to you what he did to Mr. Ashford. I left Blackthorn a month after you did. Couldn't stand to work there anymore, knowing what I knew. Moved to Dover, started over. But I've thought of you often, wondered if you made a life for yourself. If you found peace, I hope you did. I hope you know you were right. About Carson, about the danger, about everything. And I hope someday the truth comes out. Dorothy. Lena finished reading and carefully refolded the letter. She knew, Caleb said quietly. All those years, there was someone who witnessed it and stayed silent. Because she was scared. Because she had children to protect. Lena looked at him. I can't blame her for that. Neither can I. But it would have saved my mother years of hiding, would have brought Carson to justice decades sooner. Maybe. Or maybe Carson would have killed Dorothy too, and her children would have grown up without a mother. Lena set the letters down. We can't know how it would have played out. We only know how it did. Caleb sank into a chair. My father's death was witnessed. Someone saw it happen. All these years, I thought we'd never have proof beyond Carson's confession. But this is the proof. Dorothy's testimony, even secondhand, it corroborates everything we found. She's dead now. Her testimony died with her. The letter remains. And her daughter sent it to us, which means she wants the truth known too. Lena picked up the letters. We add this to the archive. Make sure future generations know exactly what happened, how many people were hurt, how many stayed silent out of fear. And forgive Dorothy for not speaking up, and understand why she couldn't. They sat together in the quiet library, processing the weight of revelation. Finally, Caleb spoke. I want to find her grave, Dorothy's. Pay our respects. We'll go to Dover, as soon as we can arrange it. They made the trip 2 weeks later. Dover was a bustling port city, salt air and seabirds and ships coming and going. They found Dorothy's grave in a small cemetery overlooking the channel, a simple headstone marking where she rested. Dorothy Barnes, beloved mother, 1850 to 1926. Lena placed flowers on the grave. Thank you for telling the truth, even if it took 30 years. Caleb stood beside her. You protected your children. No one can fault you for that. They stayed for a while, listening to the wind and the distant crash of waves. On the way back to Blackthorn, they stopped at the boarding house where Margaret had hidden. The landlady remembered her. Quiet woman, kept to herself, always paid on time. She'd left 3 years ago, the day after hearing about Carson's arrest. Walked right out, the landlady said. Didn't even take her things, just said she was going home. Home. The word settled around Lena as they drove back north. Blackthorn had become that for all of them. A place they'd fought for, bled for, rebuilt from broken foundations. Home wasn't where you started. It was where you chose to stay. 5 years after Lena's arrival, Blackthorn had been transformed completely. The inn was thriving, booked solid year-round. They'd added a wing for long-term residents, artists and writers who wanted a quiet place to work. The gardens had won awards from the County Horticultural Society. Tom had been promoted to estate manager, overseeing a staff of 12. Rose had completed her training and now managed the day-to-day operations with calm efficiency. She'd gotten married the previous summer to a young solicitor from the village, and they were expecting their first child. Marjorie's daughter had joined the kitchen staff and was already developing her own recipes. Anna wrote regularly from the north, where she and her brother had opened a small shop. Margaret had stepped back from active management, spending her time writing memoirs and tending the rose garden. She looked younger than she had when she'd first returned, the fear that had haunted her eyes replaced by contentment. And Caleb had become someone Lena barely recognized from that first cold encounter in the library. He laughed easily now, trusted openly, had friends in the village and business partners in London. The estate was profitable, the staff happy, the house filled with light. He'd asked Lena to marry him on a spring evening in the rose garden, nervous and awkward and perfect. She'd said yes without hesitation. The wedding was small, staff, friends, a few guests from the inn. They married in St. Catherine's Church, the same place where Caleb's parents had exchanged vows, and the reception was held on Blackthorn's grounds. Standing under the lanterns as the sun set, Lena looked around at the faces surrounding them. Rose glowing with happiness, Tom grinning widely, Margaret crying unabashedly, Marjorie already planning what to cook for breakfast. This was her family, built not from blood but from choice, from shared struggle and mutual respect, and the simple decision to stay when leaving would have been easier. Caleb pulled her close as music started playing. Happy? He asked, deliriously. No regrets? Only that I didn't ask more questions sooner. He laughed. That's very you. I know. They danced under the stars, surrounded by people they loved, in a house that had finally learned to breathe. 10 years after Lena's arrival, she stood in the entrance hall holding a baby, her daughter, Eleanor Margaret Ashford, 6 months old, all wide eyes and grasping hands. She looks like you, Rose said, peering at the baby. She looks like her grandmother, Lena corrected. My grandmother, Elizabeth. Then she's got good stock, Lena smiled. Eleanor grabbed her finger and held on tight. The inn was preparing for another anniversary celebration. 15 years since reopening, the longest continuous operation in Blackthorn's modern history. They'd added a memorial in the garden, a stone marker listing names. Richard Ashford, Elizabeth Carr, Dorothy Barnes, Martha Hargrave, everyone who'd been hurt by Carson's greed and cruelty. A reminder that the past wasn't erased, just integrated, acknowledged. Caleb found her there, slipping an arm around her waist. Ready for the party? Always. Liar. You hate being the center of attention. I've gotten better at it. He kissed her temple. You have. Among other things. They walked outside together, Eleanor babbling contentedly. The gardens were full again, 3 generations of families who'd been coming to Blackthorn since it reopened. New guests discovering the place for the first time. Staff members who'd been teenagers when they started and were now adults with families of their own. Tom's son was training to take over grounds management. Rose's daughter was learning hospitality from her mother. The cycle continuing, building on foundations that had been tested and proven strong. Margaret emerged from the rose garden, dirt on her hands, joy on her face. There's my girl, she said, reaching for Eleanor. The baby went to her happily, and Margaret cooed. She's going to be a heartbreaker. She's 6 months old. It's never too early to plan. Lena watched her daughter in Margaret's arms, 3 generations of women connected by love rather than just blood. The party unfolded around them, music and laughter, food and stories. The house that had once been a prison of silence now rang with life. As the sun set, Caleb raised a glass for the toast, but instead of speaking himself, he handed it to Lena. She looked at him, surprised. Your turn, he said simply. Lena accepted the glass, looking around at the faces watching her. 15 years ago, she began, I came to this house looking for answers about my grandmother. I found them, but I also found something I didn't expect. She gestured to the people surrounding her, the house behind them, the gardens glowing in twilight. I found that broken things can be fixed, that darkness doesn't last forever, that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to act despite it. Her voice strengthened. My grandmother ran from this place because she had no other choice, but we had choices, and we chose to stay, to fight, to rebuild, not just the house but ourselves. She raised her glass. To everyone who stayed when it was hard, who chose hope over despair, who believed that Blackthorn could be more than its past. To Blackthorn, the crowd echoed. To family, Lena added, looking at Caleb, at Margaret, at Rose and Tom and all the others. To the family we build, not the one we're born into. They drank. And as the stars emerged overhead, Lena felt something settle in her chest, a sense of completion, of rightness. She'd spent years fixing things, curtains and coats and broken trust. But in the end, what she'd really fixed was herself. The part that had felt adrift after her grandmother died. The part that had wondered where she belonged. She belonged here, at Blackthorn. In this house that had tried to destroy so many, but had instead been transformed into something beautiful. Eleanor reached for her, and Lena took her daughter back, held her close as music started playing again. Caleb appeared at her side. Dance with me? Always. They moved across the garden, 3 of them now, instead of 2, surrounded by light and love and the evidence of what determination could build. The house stood behind them, solid and whole, its dark history acknowledged but no longer defining, its future bright with possibility. And in that moment, holding her husband and daughter under a sky full of stars, Lena Whitaker knew something with absolute certainty. She was exactly where she was meant to be.